facilitate that webinar with Adji.
All right, yeah.
Is everyone based on the same campus? I know that UVS has different campuses.
Now, it depends on each one's agenda. I'm actually at Saint Louis.
Yeah.
But in terms of administrative duties and academic, responsibilities, I have to come to Dakar when we have an in-person activity.
Yeah.
But in case, the agenda is flexible and relaxed, each one can go back home. I'm actually at Saint Louis.
Right.
But I was there just 5 days ago, having an in-person workshop with colleagues.
Nice.
Yeah. It's very flexible. For example, say now we haven't been seeing each other for a quite bit long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, someone wants us to speak Wolof.
Wolof?
That's Africans, we should speak our languages.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe next time.
Yeah, probably next time. Anyway, we have experts here who can lecture in Wolof, who can do a lot of technical things in Wolof. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have these talks like every month or every week?
Yes, it is a monthly event.
Nice.
It is a monthly event based on various topics.
Yeah.
Depending on the availability of experts and,
Yeah. That's nice.
It is a monthly one.
Yeah, it's a good initiative.
Mm-hmm. And thanks for being around today.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
There's attendee 563742 who says he's not from Senegal.
All right, I can see.
Where are you from, 563742?
It's
It's among the attendees?
Yeah.
Now, attendees, they are all around, the world. It's sometimes not easy to identify where they are.
Yeah.
I know that the panelists are all faculty members or admin or staff members, but the attendees, they can come from all around the world.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
He says, he is funny. Nice to meet you, 563742.
As our motto is, you can connect everywhere.
Yes.
Oh, okay. You live in Germany.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bonsoir, Alhassan. Je pense que nous pouvons démarrer. Il est 15h06, mais nous avons 36 participants. Et non, je laisse Dr Alhassan Abdullah faire l'introduction.
Thank you. Dear President of the Virtual University of Senegal, distinguished deans, dear members of the administrative and technical services staff, dear panelists, dear attendees, honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is Dr. Alhassan Abdullah. I am a faculty member acting as assistant professor of English at the Virtual University of Senegal. Through my voice and on behalf of the Virtual University of Senegal, the Pôle of Innovation and Expertise for Development says welcome to all of you and is honored to receive you today online on the occasion of the monthly seminar called the Rendez-vous de la Recherche. This great event is organized with the technical support of the Division of Communication and Marketing and the Division of Information Systems and Infrastructure. The objective of this activity is to bring scholars and professionals together and to give them the opportunity to present their work to the scientific community, to contribute to the promotion of science and the dissemination of knowledge through panels like this one. The topic of this particular session is purpose-driven AI research, and we are pleased to welcome the panelist, Dr. Adji Bousso DIENG, Assistant Professor of Computer Science at Princeton University, USA, and head of the Vertex Research Lab, which is at the intersection of artificial intelligence and natural sciences. You will soon hear about her impressive bio from the moderator. We are also honored and pleased to introduce Dr. Seydina Moussa NDIAYE, the moderator of the panel. Dr. NDIAYE is a faculty member and professor of artificial intelligence at the Virtual University of Senegal. At the national level, Dr. NDIAYE is member of the National Digital Council and many steering committees, such as SN 2025, SENNUM SA, CNC, PTN. He is member of the IA for Development Initiative in Africa and member of the AU AI expert team working on guidelines for national strategies on AA in Africa. Dr. NDIAYE earned a PhD degree in computer science, specializing in artificial intelligence from Université Pôle in Toulouse, France. He also holds an MBA from IAE Paris-Sorbonne. In addition to his academic activities and responsibilities, it is important to highlight that Dr. NDIAYE is a director of the FORCE-N program, which is the university's flagship program. FORCE-N is an open training program for capacity building for employment and entrepreneurship in the digital world, which is funded by the MasterCard Foundation for the next 6 years. Dr. NDIAYE works also with the Ministry of Higher Education, Research and Innovation, supervising the entire digital transformation of higher education in Senegal. In particular, he coordinated a project to acquire the Senegalese supercomputer. Dr. NDIAYE has been acting as a business leader for more than 10 years in the field of software development, integrating innovative technologies such as AI, blockchain, and IoT with several application areas ranging from health to agriculture, including transport, insurance, and territorial development. At the continental and international level, Dr. Seydina Moussa NDIAYE acts as an expert for the African Union in the implementation of the AU 2060 agenda. He is also the president of the Senegalese Association of Artificial Intelligence, which brings together some 60 Senegalese scholars and professionals in the field, in Senegal and across the diaspora. Without any delay, I'm going to give the floor to Dr. Seydina Moussa NDIAYE to introduce the panelists. Thank you for your attention. Dr. NDIAYE, you have the floor.
Thank you, Alhassan. Bonjour à tous. Donc, first in French, please, and after it will be in English, okay? I'm pleased to welcome Dr. Adji Bousso. Donc, Adji Bousso est professeur associé en informatique à l'Université de Princeton, où elle dirige Vertex dans ses recherches à l'intersection de l'intelligence artificielle et des sciences naturelles. Elle est affiliée au département de génie chimique et biologique, au Princeton Materials Institute et au High Meadows Environmental Institute, HMEI. Elle est également chercheure chez Google AI et fondatrice et présidente de l'organisation à but non lucratif The Africa I Know. Madame Dieng a récemment été nommée AI 2050 Early Career Fellow par Schmidt Futures and Anity Randall Innovator of 2022 par l'American Statistical Association pour ses travaux de recherche et de sensibilisation. Elle a obtenu son doctorat à l'Université de Columbia. Ses travaux de doctorat ont reçu de nombreuses récompenses, notamment une bourse de doctorat Google en machine learning, une nomination en tant que Rising Star du machine learning par l'Université du Maryland et un prix Savage de la Société internationale d'analyse bayésienne pour sa thèse de doctorat. Elle est originaire de Kaolack au Sénégal. Now in English, please. I'm pleased to welcome Dr. Adji Bousso DIENG. Adji Bousso is an assistant professor of computer science at Princeton University, where she leads Vertex on research at the intersection of artificial intelligence and the natural sciences. She is affiliated with the Department of Chemical and Biological Engineering, the Princeton Materials Institute, and the High Meadows Environmental Institute, HMEI. She's also a research scientist at Google AI and the founder and president of the nonprofit organization, The Africa I Know. Adji has been recently named an AI 2050 Early Career Fellow by Schmidt Futures and the Annie T. Randall Innovator of 2022 for research and advocacy by the American Statistical Association. She received a PhD from Columbia University. A doctoral work received many recognitions, including a Google PhD fellowship in machine learning, a Rising Star in Machine Learning nomination by the University of Maryland, and a Savage Award from the International Society for Bayesian Analysis for doctoral thesis. It's okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, she hails from Kaolack, Senegal. I'm very happy to have you here, Adji, and thank you for your time. And I will give you the floor right now.
Thank you everyone for the very warm welcome. Let me try to share my screen. This one. Can you see it?
Yes, it's okay.
All right, so let me do this. And then this. Do you see the full screen or do you see the green?
Yeah, the full screen, it's okay.
Okay, no green and red bar.
No, it's okay.
Okay, great. So hello, everyone. Thank you for attending this talk, and thank you, Seydina, for the invitation, and everyone at UVS. I'm really glad to be giving this overview on artificial intelligence. I also wanted to take this opportunity in order to just reflect and think, like answering some questions such as, if I had to do it again, what would I do? Because I think that may be useful to the young people in the audience. Someone is asking a question. Should I answer questions or just continue? Seydina?
Yeah, it's okay. It's as you want.
I can ignore the questions on the chat.
You can.
Okay, great. Okay, sounds good. I was saying that I'll take this opportunity just to also provide my perspectives on AI research on the continent, and also provide some advice, feedback to the young people in the audience based on my own experience. So first, the outline is as follows. I'll give a very high-level overview of the AI landscape, just so that everyone knows what's out there and what's being done in AI. And then I'll talk about my research lab at Princeton, Vertex, and the work we're doing there and our approach to AI research. And then I'll discuss more in detail one line of work that we're pursuing, which is how to measure and enforce diversity in AI methods, which is critical to a lot of applications of AI in the sciences in particular. And then I'll end the talk with, the outlook and perspective. AI overview. I usually like to start my talks with asking the audience what they think about when they think about AI, because my understanding is that the general public in general, when you mention the phrase artificial intelligence, they can get scared. It can be intimidating. And they often tell you that they think about robots, like these entities that are very smart and very capable, and that can do a lot of things that humans can do and even better. And also that these beings are at some point, sometimes you feel that like it's something that's going to happen in the very near future, that they're going to take over the world. These robots are going to take over the world and kill all of us and take over. That's the AI doomsday view. They also think about, all these games that AIs are winning when opposed to humans. And I think all these views on AI is due to the fact that that's what the media, these are the stories about AI that the media picks up. Things that are being developed by industry labs such as DeepMind, where they're building like these very capable AI systems. but I think that's only one community within the AI research community that's doing work like that. They are motivated by artificial general intelligence. They want to develop artificial general intelligence, which is this idea that you can basically create like these entities that I mentioned that are highly capable, highly intelligent, and that can perform tasks that even humans cannot do. But there's another community within AI who are focused on leveraging AI as a powerful technology to solve concrete problems, especially in the sciences or as it relates to other things like healthcare, agriculture, all those things. And I like to think of myself as a researcher in that second community. And so in the next few slides, I will talk about all these applications of AI. Sometimes it touches on the first AGI community, and another time it pertains to the second community. So I'll just mention all these applications that AI has been useful for before moving on to mentioning what we do at Vertex. So one useful application of AI is in document summarization. There's a lot of textual data out there in the world. And summarization is the goal of basically just taking all those textual data and then summarizing them, compressing them into these bits of information that are useful and that reflect the high-level content of the textual data. And you can use that in news summarization or allowing people to easily navigate the web. There's a lot of developments currently in AI for drug discovery. So the drug discovery process is basically that you identify this target, a molecular target that is believed to be involved in the disease process. And you want to use AI in order to identify new compounds, new chemical structures that can interact with that target in such a way that it reverses the disease process. And so AI is used to identify, synthesize those compounds, and also, do prediction in terms of how that compound binds with the target, for example. There's a lot of work in this. There's also one huge success that I think is the biggest success of AI so far, as far as I'm concerned, is this AlphaFold. It's a system, AI system by DeepMind, that solves the problem known as protein folding. Protein folding is a very big challenge in biology, at least it used to be. Now it's considered quote unquote solved, where you are given a protein amino sequence, and then you wanna predict how that binds, how that folds, like predicting the 3D structure of that. And DeepMind managed to tackle that problem. There are a lot of domain scientists who are saying that there are still challenges pending in terms of identifying different conformers, meaning proteins that have that have the same amino acid, but that can fold in different ways. So there are still challenges in solving those problems, but they tackle this long-standing biology problem, and it's one of our biggest successes in AI, I think. There's also these more fun applications like image generation, which has taken the creative world by a storm. You see a lot of them right now. There's also trying to caption images, which is a very useful application for people who are visually impaired. Basically, the goal here is that you're given an image and you want to describe it as much as you can so that the description is consistent with the image that you see. So what you're seeing here is a bunch of images and the descriptions that the AI output. You can also use AI to learn to improve customer service. So let's say you are Amazon and you have all these products. Some customers leave reviews for those products. You want to be able to take all those textual reviews and identify the sentiment of those reviews. So you can use AI to learn these features, they're called features, and see whether that review corresponds to a negative review or to a positive reviews. And then that allows you to develop a marketing strategy in order to propose users what they would most like. Another application that's very useful is in translation. For example, if you go to a city and they speak a different language, AI is so developed that now you can translate, the textual information that you see in the environment, in the new environment you are, the new city that speaks a different language. You can get automated translation of things that are around you so that you can navigate the environment. Another useful application that you're benefiting from right now is in automatic speech recognition. If you have a smartphone, you already have that. For example, think about Siri or all these assistants that you have in your phone or at home. They are based on automatic speech recognition, where you basically have an audio signal and you translate it into something that the machine understands, and then enables you to communicate with the machine via speech instead of textual input or something else. A very useful application of AI, this is also from DeepMind, is in meteorology, where you have radar data and you train. Here they trained something called a generative adversarial network. It's a generative model that actually takes in a little bit of context of radar data and allows you to predict the next 90 minutes. So you can predict rainfall in the next 90 minutes. That's a short window. That's why it's called nowcasting. People are looking into predicting it into a way longer time frame, which is a more challenging problem. But this was already exciting that they can, accurately predict rain within the next 90 minutes. There's also a lot of AI in science work going on, especially when it pertains to small molecules. A lot of scientific applications involve this thing called molecular simulation that people are using AI on right now to make faster. You want to be able to learn representations of the system so that you can predict the forces and the energy of the system. So there's a lot of work around this area. People are, especially NVIDIA, are also working on building a digital twin of the Earth using AI. The idea here is that if you build a replica of the Earth that's digital, then you can understand and predict the Earth's climate system by being able to ask different questions, like how would the climate change if I increase human activity? How would it change if I increase temperature? All those things, like you can ask different questions, make different simulations to understand the Earth's climate. This is a very challenging problem that requires a lot of compute. So NVIDIA is tackling it, but I don't think everybody can tackle these large-scale problems because of how engineering heavy they are. Another success from AI was, using computer vision tools in order to capture the image of a black hole. Apparently, I'm not a physicist, but apparently this was a breakthrough. Nobody saw what a black hole looked like until this image. It made a lot of noise when it came out, and that was enabled by AI. Another application of AI that's very useful is in generating new molecules. What I'm showing here is one example of approach in how to generate new molecules. It's called the diffusion model. The idea being just that, you train a diffusion model by learning to noise your data. You go from your actual data, let's say you have an image, so that is more concrete. You learn to go from the image to something that's extremely blurry in such a way that it doesn't even look like an image. And you train, when you finish training, you generate new images by reverting that process. So going from noise to the actual image. It's very successful in many areas, including in science, and people are using it to generate novel molecules in 3D. You can use AI to also understand the topics that are being discussed in a bunch of documents. And this is very useful when you're trying to understand legal documents. People have used these systems, these types of AI systems in law, but also, ancient text. If you have ancient text, historians, they like to use these models. They're called topic models. They like to use these models a lot to understand ancient text. It's also used in marketing and all of those areas. The idea being that if you take a bunch of documents, you don't need to be told what's being discussed in those documents, but you can use topic models to discover that automatically. And the idea is that you'll get these clusters. So here you're shown 6 clusters, each one being a topic. And you see that the words within each of these clusters, they talk about the same thing. They are correlated. So this first cluster is like Republican, Bush, campaign, Senator, Democrats. So you can see that it's a topic about American politics. And then there's this one that's music, dance, songs, opera, concert. That's clearly about music and performance. So you discover these meaningful clusters automatically by using topic models on a bunch of documents. You can also use AI to understand how language has evolved over time. Here, I'm showing such an output from something called the dynamic topic model. So the way this works is that you collect a bunch of documents. Each document has a timestamp when that document was created. And then the dynamic topic model takes that, and then you can look at the word trends according to each topic to know how language usage of that word has evolved. For example, here, we used the dynamic topic modeling on a bunch of UN documents. So the UN, the United Nations, they have these debates every year. And what they discuss during those debates is transcribed into documents. So you have you have those bunch of documents each year. So all those documents have a timestamp. Now you take a dynamic topic model, you develop a dynamic topic model on that data, and you're able to see how different topics are talked about over time. For example, if you look at climate change, the model is telling you that climate change used to be discussed in the 1990s in terms of the ozone layer and waste, whereas nowadays, like in the 2010s and beyond, it's no longer about the ozone layer or waste, but more about gas emissions and global warming. And this was discovered by the model automatically, and it is consistent with what we know. There's also this other topic about human rights, and the model is saying that human rights used to be talked about in the 1980s and prior in terms of equality. So whenever human rights was mentioned, it was in terms of equality between men and women, whereas now, equality can be something else, race and all of that. Yeah, equality. And then in the 2010s, it's not just about equality, but now there's gender that's factoring a lot more in these discussions. So there are a lot of those things that you can get from the model. Those are just 2 examples. So all these examples that I showed, a lot of them are based on a task, what I call a task modeling paradigm. The task modeling paradigm. So it's different from how statisticians think about modeling data. As I have one side that's a statist that thinks as a statistician, which is that you let the data be the first class citizen. So when you have a problem, you first look at the data, you plot it, do some preliminary data analysis, see what the quirks in the data are, and then you move on to modeling. Now in deep learning and modern AI, data is a second class citizen. It comes after. The thing that comes first is the task you want to solve. Let's say you want to summarize a document, that's my task. That's what I start with. And then I start with the task, specify what I want to do. So for example, summarizing documents or mapping text to images, which is what systems like DALL-E from OpenAI do. Let's say that's the task that you want to accomplish. You go and collect a bunch of text image pairs, collecting it from all various sources. Like you scrape a lot of data everywhere without regards of anything. You just wanted to get the data that allows you to do that task. Then you learn to perform that task using, most of the time, neural networks trained with backpropagation on stochastic gradient descent. Don't worry about those details. And then you evaluate that system based on a qualitative demo. For example, you put an interface online that users can go and add text and get the image. That's one way of evaluating. Or you do human evaluation, send it to Amazon Mechanical Turk, or you use these other proxy quantitative metric that tells you how good your output is. So basically, this is the current paradigm in AI research. You start with a task, you collect the data you need to accomplish that task, then you learn to perform that task using neural networks, and then you evaluate. This is a problem. Of course, this is not how statisticians do things, but this is a problem. Of course, you can do a lot of amazing things with it. Like, for example, GP3 is a system that's based on that paradigm, and you can give it a prompt. This is one prompt, and it can complete it very, very nicely and have these amazing outputs that look like the system has understood how language work, how humans think, and all of that. This is another very impressive result. I had this today just for this talk. I asked ChatGPT, which is one AI system that was put out by OpenAI very recently. And that's based on this paradigm that I just mentioned, like starting with a task, gathering all the data you need for that, and then training, and then evaluating. Here, I'm asking ChatGPT, do you know what the word teranga means? And it knows what teranga means. At least when I read the description, I was like, oh, that's interesting. So it knows how to answer these questions, and it knows a lot about a lot of things. There's also DALI, which is another work by OpenAI. These works are basically these types of large model-based work are put by OpenAI, which is a company, DeepMind, another company, Google AI, another company, and maybe Facebook, another company. So there's a lot of this that's coming out of industry, and there's a reason for that, because in industry, you have a lot of compute resources. They have a lot of resources. They're very rich, have a lot of money. They can afford to like invest in a lot of compute that you need in order to make these systems work as well as they do. So DALI is another one where you give it a text prompt. So just the text for what you want to generate, and it gives you images that are consistent with what you want to generate. So they work very well. This was Google AI's version of DALI, which is also, you give it a text prompt describing what you want to generate, what image you want to generate, and it gives you different proposals for that image. And you can have a lot of fun with this. But these systems come with problems, ethical considerations. And I believe, this is personal belief, it's not something documented or anything. I believe it's because of the task-driven, task modeling paradigm, which is where you put data as a second-class citizen and start with a task. I think that's why we're running into these ethical issues. So one example of ethical issue for these systems is one from OpenAI's GPT, which is negatively biased towards Muslims. So when you ask it to complete a sentence that starts with two Muslims walk, it says into a cafe, but then when you read the rest of the sentence, you see that it's actually replicating these negative stereotypes about Muslims being violent people, which is, of course, very harmful. You're a Muslim, you read this, and it's basically just stereotyping you negatively as a violent person. And that's because the data, they scraped it from everywhere just because they wanted to solve that task of completing text without regard of what's in the data. And so the model picks up all the biases that are in the data. There are those biases in the data because the data are produced by humans, and we all know that humans are biased. There are racists out there, there are sexist people out there, all of those things. So that gets replicated in the data, and because the data was just collected just as a way to perform the task, you end up with the model outputting these things. Another ethical consideration with these very large models is that they have a very high carbon footprint. Emma Struble, who is an AI researcher, I believe, in the University of Washington, had a study in 2019. I forgot to put the date. I think it's 2019, where she actually showed that these very large models that are based on something called a transformer, which is a particular neural network architecture, they have orders and orders of magnitude higher carbon footprint that a lot of like human activity, flights, and all of those things, like driving a car. These models have orders of magnitude higher carbon footprint than all of those things, which is cause for concern, of course, because these are being deployed and run by these companies all the time. Another ethical consideration is because these systems are developed in a task-driven way. People only care about fulfilling that task and accomplishing that task. They end up being blind to whether that task is something to be performed in the first place. So, for example, we clearly know that there are tasks that we shouldn't even be trying to do with AI or deep learning. One of them being this paper. It made a lot of negative noise when it came out. So people working on ethical AI picked up on this and criticized the venue, Nature Communications, which is supposed to be a very prestigious venue for research. That why did they allow this work to be published there? So this work was about, like the title says, tracking historical changes in trustworthiness using machine learning of facial cues. So for example, they were trying to assess trustworthiness based on facial cues, which is of course unethical when you think about it, just without even worrying about what this task would be. And I think that's those ethical things, those ethical issues, they happen because people are only task driven. They don't care about, they're not careful. All the ethical considerations are more personal and can actually affect people's life more directly. For example, somebody got sent to jail on Facebook because the text they posted was translated was wrongly translated, leading to, I think this was a Pakistani who wrote something and it got translated into Israeli, and the Israeli police came to send him to jail because the translation was wrong. So these systems do actually impact people negatively when they don't work. There's also, because they're very powerful and they can output images or text that are indistinguishable from reality. There's a lot of threats for disinformation, and this can impact democracy. There are problems of people have reported sex trafficking due to all of these systems being able to output to have outputs that are indistinguishable from reality. There are privacy concerns. OpenAI developed this thing called GitHub Autopilot that is supposed to help coders, software developers code more easily. And Autopilot was trained on data that sometimes has licensing that, they were not supposed to access that code, but they did. So there were privacy concerns when it comes to that. And also it's been shown in one paper that actually these very large models, they are sensitive to rare data in the sense that when they're done being trained, you can track back the rare data they were trained on. And rare data is usually something that pertains to marginalized communities because they are not represented in the data. So they tend to be the rare data. And so these large models actually expose people from these communities, which is very bad. There's also the point of power and control, because these systems require so much resources. It means that only people who have those resources will be able to develop them and to have access to them. So it leaves so many communities behind, especially communities in Africa where we don't have, a lot of compute, we don't have a lot of data. So there's that question of power and control. Because of all of this, I've always been attracted to actually build systems that are robust and that solve concrete problems instead of just being driven by accomplishing a task. And in my work, I combine deep learning and probabilistic modeling in order to do that. So what is deep learning? In deep learning, you take advantage of the fact that there are big and large data sets, and you want to be able to process them efficiently and learn useful features for different applications. And so deep learning is a way of doing AI that enables you to process large amounts of data in a very flexible way using these things called neural network. Probabilistic modeling takes into account the fact that the world is full of uncertainty, and we want to understand what that uncertainty is in order to make better predictions and decisions. And probabilistic modeling also take into account the fact that humans dispose already of a vast amount of knowledge that comes from different sources. For example, we know there's been a lot of scientific theories throughout the years. There's a lot of theory around a lot of things in science, and we understand the world. Certain things around the world we do understand, And there are things that we know how we want them to work. So all of those are knowledge, is a pool of knowledge that probabilistic modeling allows you to incorporate. So probabilistic modeling allows you to account for uncertainty and domain knowledge when learning from data. And so my work is to use AI for the natural sciences by combining probabilistic modeling and deep learning to develop methods that are efficient, robust, and grounded in knowledge. I'm interested in using these methods, these new methods that I develop in healthcare, tackling problems in healthcare, climate, energy, and all that. So my research lab at Vertex, at Princeton is called Vertex. The idea being to use AI as a connector to different fields. So all the fields in the natural sciences, from chemistry, material science, physics, biology, and all of that, climate science. So we do work on that. Our approach, though, isn't to take state-of-the-art AI methods and apply them to data coming from the natural sciences. That's not the approach we're using. We're actually thinking, okay, let's start with the natural sciences themselves, and then identify problems, common problems in those sciences, and then develop new AI methods that tackle those problems. In that way, you actually innovate in the AI scene as well. So you have these new AI methods now that didn't exist before because they were developed by solving actual problems from these natural sciences. And once you have that method, you can go back and solve the problem. So that's the approach we're using. And we're funded by different sources. The National Science Foundation, which is one of the main funding sources in the US. We are involved in one center, one of only five national AI centers in the US on a 15 million grant. And we're working on developing materials, new materials with desired properties using AI. Also involved in 2 grants internal to Princeton, where I'm collaborating with domain scientists, chemists, and electrical engineers in leveraging AI for polymers or semiconductors, and also a grant from Schmidt Futures to develop AI for nanoporous materials. There are a diverse set of people, like postdocs, Abib Senegalese as well, and Jenny is also a postdoc, and there's Andre from Rwanda, and Cindy, and Liji, and Danielle, and Constance. So these are all people with very different backgrounds. And the reason being that I think for the types of work we do, we need a diverse set of people with a diverse background, including demographic background, yeah. And I like to think about things in terms of pillars, so core principles that we base our research on. And at Vertex, we have 3 pillars, which is diversity. So diversity in the people involved in the lab, but also diversity in terms of the methods we develop. We're trying to measure and incorporate diversity into AI systems because that touches on so many things. It can help alleviate bias, but it can also help in getting better generative models for the sciences so that you can discover new molecules and new materials. Diversity is very important for that. And then the second pillar is interaction. A lot of the things, the processes and methods in science involve graphs interacting, different graphs interacting. For example, molecular dynamics, which is used everywhere in science, is a bunch of graphs interacting. There are different classes of materials, molecular crystals, that involve graphs interacting. Metal organic frameworks, the same thing. So this pillar was based on identifying this as a core problem in the sciences, and we're developing methods to tackle that, methods that can capture interaction in order to learn a representation for these systems, and predict things like properties and things like that. The third and final pillar is multimodality. There, the idea being that there are different sources of information coming in different forms. So for example, you have text, but you also have molecules and materials. How can you develop systems that can take into account all those modalities and learn how they interact together and learn how to compose them in diverse ways. So these pillars, they also interact themselves. So what brought me to this line of work is because I think I have the training that allows me to do this. Statistics, I have statistical foundations from my PhD at Columbia, but also prior, like mathematical foundations through my studies at Telecom and before that in Senegal. And also I have deep learning foundations, which are needed for the type of work we do. I interned at different tech companies, and they mainly work on deep learning. So I picked up foundations there in addition to courses at school. And also those internships allowed me to pick up engineering skills and be very comfortable with computation. So if you're wondering, okay, what do you need to, what core skills do you need to get in order to conduct these types of research? I would say it's these things. So let's move to discussing how to measure and enforce diversity. The reason why diversity is a core pillar at Vertex is because it literally pertains a lot of things in AI, including data set curation. With data sets, you cannot do AI without data sets typically, especially at least for most problems. So data set curation needs a lot of diversity. Generative modeling, you need diversity. Active learning, you need diversity. Reinforcement learning, you need diversity. Contrastive learning, you need diversity. A lot of AI methods need diversity to be reflected into that method. So that's why we're focusing on that. We're especially focusing on incorporating diversity in generative models. And I worked on that in the context of generative adversarial network. I'll mention what that is. What's a generative model? If you don't know, I like to define it as, in a very simple way, as it's basically just math that tells you how data was generated, and you wanted to learn the parameters involved in describing that math in order for you to be able to generate new data. If you're familiar with probability distributions, a generative model is just a probability distribution. You assume that the data that you observe comes from some distribution that you don't know. You only know the samples from that distribution, and you can learn to get new samples from that distribution using different ways. And different ways correspond to different families of generative models. For example, there are generative models that learn what the density of the distribution is. The variational autoencoders, VAEs, I don't know if you know about those. They're very popular. There's also normalizing flows, autoregressive models, energy-based models, all of those. Another way of doing generative modeling is just to learn to sample from the distribution directly. That's what generative adversarial networks do. Another way I mentioned at the beginning is diffusion models, where they learn the distribution by noising the generation process. So I worked on enforcing diversity in generative adversarial networks, and the way we did that was just basically use the original GAN loss. Generative adversarial network is also called GAN for short. And this is the original loss of the GAN. It's getting technical now. This is the original loss of the GAN. It's a minimax procedure. And enforcing diversity, we did that by just adding an entropy regularizer to the original loss. And the entropy here is for the distribution of the generative model of the GAN. And you can, find ways to tractably compute the gradients of these regularizers so that you can train this end-to-end and with the usual way of training things. So we did that, and we observed that there's no mode collapse, and you can still generate diverse samples. This was in 2019. We haven't looked at how to apply this to more modern data sets and large models, but yes, in 2019, this was basically a good way of doing generative modeling and getting diverse sample out of the model. Now, after this work, this was during my PhD, at the end of my PhD, then I started faculty. And my question then was, if diversity is so important in AI, why is no one actually focusing on measuring it correctly? And so it got us thinking about how to measure diversity. Then we looked at ecology, which is the field, the scientific field that basically studies diversity. That's what they do. They wanna see how diverse certain species of animals are, and so that they can do conservation and things like that. So we looked at that field called ecology, and basically the way they define, they have a very precise definition of diversity there, which is that diversity is exponential of entropy. And so for us, it was like, okay, how can we then use that in machine learning so that we can measure diversity? But we don't want to just use exponential entropy, any entropy. We wanted to use an entropy that would allow us to compute the diversity of samples without relying on distributions or any of the things, so that you can give me samples from a generative model or samples from a data set, and I can tell you this is how diverse these samples are. That's what we were aiming for. And so that led us to define the Venn score as the exponential of entropy, but the entropy being the von Neumann entropy in statistical mechanics, quantum mechanics. But exponential of von Neumann entropy is exactly equal to exponential of Shannon entropy of the eigenvalues of a similarity matrix. This is technical, sorry. But yeah, we ended up with this very nice definition of diversity that we can now use within AI, because you can give me now any samples from any generative model or data set, and I can tell you how diversity is using this definition. It's called the Venn score. And it has very nice properties. It's interpretable. For example, the Venn score will be 2 if you have 2 different types of samples in your data set. It will be 3 if you have 3 types of samples in your data set. It will be 4 if you have 4 types of samples in the data set. So the Venn score is interpreted as the effective number of unique elements in a sample, and it increases linearly as the number of modes of the sample increases. And when you combine different ways of measuring diversity, the Venn score increases as well. And this is not the case for what people were using in AI to measure diversity. For example, this thing called IntDiv, internal diversity, is what they were using in molecular generative modeling. It was being used everywhere, when it turns out it actually is not a good measure for diversity. So hoping that people will now use this, because it's capturing what a diversity metric should be capturing. This is just an example of how the Venn score actually can detect diversity where existing metrics used for diversity fail to capture. For example, this was a generative model. Venn score used to measure the diversity of 2 generative models for molecules. And we have the diversity for the original data set, the original molecular data set. This is the diversity. The Venn score is able to detect the replicas that you see here. Wherever you see yellow, it means that it's redundant information, basically that you have 2 molecules that are exactly the same. So the diversity should be lower for this than for this. So the Venn score was able to capture that. It has, as you see, it's 55.8 for this and 142.1 for this. So this one has higher diversity than this. But the original metric that was being used in AI for molecules is actually showing the opposite. It's higher here than here. So this is clearly a failure mode for those metrics, and the Venn score doesn't have that failure mode. Showing the importance of actually thinking about these things from, rooted in the sciences that actually develop these things instead of just doing things blindly. So I always like to think about how to use things from other domains and adapt those to AI. I like intersectional work in that way. You can also use the Venn score to measure diversity of data sets. So here we used it to measure the diversity of a data set of molecules. This is important in developing the generative models of molecules themselves, because you can then know which category is less diverse, and you can get more data for that category. So this is a way of actually making these generative models better. If you're able to measure diversity and get the diversity profile of your data, meaning for each category in your data, you are able to see how diverse they are, then of course you can use that to now make the categories that are not diverse more diverse using data augmentation. And you can do that with the Venn score. This was just showing that you can actually use it to measure mode collapse, which is a problem with generative adversarial network. Yeah. And it was highlighted in the New Scientist, which was good for us. So it was the first time. We're currently using it as a regularizer, like for contrastive learning. We know that diversity is important there. Using it as a regularizer. This is ongoing work. So regularizer for a molecular generative model that we're working on, and also trying to understand how diversity itself relates to generalization, which is generalization and robustness, which are core to machine learning and AI. So outlook and perspective, I think I'm running out of time. Outlook and perspective, I hope that what I said so far gave you an overview of the AI landscape and what type of research is being done, and that diversity is important to incorporate into AI systems. At Vertex, we're looking to advance generative modeling and representation learning for the design and discovery of new chemical structures with applications in sustainability, health, and energy. The reason why I'm focused on these things is because I think they're very important to the continent, and we're hoping that the research we're doing will be able to unlock some of these problems. And of course, doing this involves taking care of some of the processes, the scientific processes involved in this, which is, for example, molecular dynamics and something called the density functional theory, see how you can make those processes faster using AI. Currently, I wanted to provide some thoughts on AI in Africa. There are a lot of challenges, of course, like we all know those challenges. For example, data scarcity is a problem because, we typically don't measure things. So we end up with not much data, and AI is data hungry. You need a lot of data to do AI. There's also not enough infrastructure in terms of, coding infrastructure, cloud, and all of those things, compute resources. We don't have a lot of that. Limited research funding. The researchers aren't well funded. And of course, in order to do like state-of-the-art research, you need funding. I mentioned that the funding, our funding sources at Vertex, and I feel very fortunate to have this funding. And I understand that in the continent, like my fellow researchers, they don't have access to that type of funding. And so it already puts them at a very significant disadvantage in terms of actually doing research and publishing it in the journals and in conferential venues. So I hope that if there's somebody here who has connection anywhere and can help tackle that funding problem, I think that's a main problem that needs to be solved. It should be solved at the government level, but we're not going to talk about that because this is not about politics. Limited capacity building in the sense that, education. How do you empower people to get these AI skills so that they can use it in their work or to do research or to create new organizations, new companies, and solve problems? So all those are challenges that are pending right now when it comes to AI in Africa. But there are also lots of opportunities. I feel like all of those problems are actually opportunities. We have unique problems on the continent, and unique problems yield unique solutions. Remember when I mentioned that I go to the natural sciences and see what problems they have, and that leads us to create new types of methods in AI. I think that's a parallel here. There's a parallel. Looking at the challenges that we have on the continent and thinking of those as actually unique problems that can yield unique solutions in terms of AI approaches and things like that. Another opportunity is that, there are many industries that have yet to be transformed in many areas: agriculture, health, energy, all of those things. I think AI can help unlock things there. And if you're somebody who is doing work in AI right now on the continent, there's basically so much you can do. Those are opportunities. For the people, if there are students watching who are in the audience, I wanted to mention this one thing because I get asked these questions often. So I thought this was a good way of doing that, of answering once, is that if I had to go back to college right now, starting like just finishing my high school and going to university, I would basically double major in AI and another scientific domain. So I would pick physics and AI, or chemistry and AI, material science and AI, or biology and AI, or engineering, or an engineering field like mechanical engineering and things like that. But bottom line is that don't just learn AI by itself. I think that that can be actually put you at a disadvantage. What you want to do is combine it with an actual domain, and a lot of things, a lot of great opportunities are at those intersections. Wanted to mention this as well. Values, I think that can help, and this is all based on like self-reflecting and thinking about what I observe, especially online, is that I think what helps is that, you know, humility, being able to self-reflect and being able to embrace negative feedback, being able to seek help when you're tackling problems. I think that goes a long way. Being very proactive is another value that I think is very helpful, meaning don't hesitate to self-educate, don't hesitate to look at where you're failing and you know, finding solutions, to find a lot of resources online. Also being proactive is, you know, reaching out to the diaspora for collaboration for the researchers here. People may respond and people may not respond, but I think that also can create, you know, useful collaborations between people on the continent and in the diaspora. Another value that's very helpful, that's been very helpful, is courage. So courage means being not afraid to apply to things. So apply to things and learn to face rejection is typically very normal. Courage also means daring to start anew. Don't think about you being too old or too young. That doesn't matter. You can always start something whenever you want to start it. And another thing about courage is that, you know, you should dare to tackle big problems, big and important problems. You can do it. A subtle caveat to watch out for, what I'm going to say is going to be very controversial, but that's a personal belief. So please feel free to agree or disagree. It's totally fine. But I think, you know, we run into this problem where we sometimes rush into things in a reactionary way, and that involves research as well. I think we should avoid that. So like there are certain, throughout history, if you observe us as Black people, what we usually do is we react a lot to external factors instead of us focusing on solving our problems. And so one example of this that I see right now in AI research is all this work around bias that I mentioned. I think that's very important, but I don't think we should be focusing on that. I think that's reactionary. I think there will always be bias problems. And I think we should instead dedicate that energy towards actually solving our problems. So thinking about what are our problems and solving those problems instead of having a reaction towards people's research having bias towards us or anything. So I think us focusing on inventing and creating our own solutions is the way to go, instead of focusing on, you know, reacting to somebody else's research. I know it's controversial, but that's my personal belief. Another caveat is to be intentional about solving the big problems using science and technology. By intentional, I mean to make sure that what you're solving is actually going to serve the continent, and to think long-term, which requires a lot of patience. Again, here there's the reactionary problem, which is that, you know, now it's very trendy to do something using AI and then go online and say, oh, look, I solved this, I solved that, just so that you can get likes and retweets and things like that. I think that's very dangerous. And I think we should instead be patient about doing all these great things and focusing on doing the work. And you know, you want to be popular, but at least you'll be building things that are important down the line. So think long-term thinking. I would say that's something that we need to be to watch out for, to be careful that we're actually doing. This was my last slide. I think I talked a lot, but I'm ready for questions. Seydina.
Thank you so much, Adji. It was wonderful, great talk. You talked about your research, And you first talked about some examples of AI, how to use AI, some example of AI and solutions. You talked about ethical considerations. It's very important. And you talk more about your work, your interesting work about deep learning and probabilistic modeling, your work on Vertex, on AI for the natural sciences. And you talked about your amazing scientific background. And you talk about your work with generative models and your work doing the Venti score. Which is great for diversity measure. And you talked about your future research direction, focusing on challenging for Africa. And after you talked about challenges for Africa or for AI in Africa and opportunities also. We have unique problems and we have industries to be transformed. So we have to do how work on that. You give us some tips about how to start AI in college for people who want to do their work on AI. Is that to have AI plus another scientific domain? It's very, very important to mix. You talk about value, great value to have, humility, proactivity, courage, and I think that it's very important for students and researchers too. And some caveat to watch out for: avoid reactionary research. Have research focus on inventing and creating instead. Solving the big problems of the continent, very important. And the last one, it was to think long term. I think that it's very, very important. I think that there is some questions on the floor. I think Q&A. If we go through that, you can respond, I think. Okay.
Which one should I do you want me to go through them, or are you going to go for them?
Oh, it has you on. If you want to search one particular, you can.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, it's Mansour. I think that's where it starts. Mansour says, if you observe examples of discoveries produced by Meta, notably in NLP, which arguments can you present to convince someone to join an academic laboratory rather than industry research? That's a great question. The line before, people used to tell you, oh, do you want to go to academia or industry? The line was clearer than now. Now the line is blurrier, because in industry you can do great research and publish. You see that they dominate actually publications at the conferences like Numérique and ICLEAR, which are the main ML/AI conferences. So you can ask yourself, oh, why would I actually need to struggle and go to academia if I can join industry and do actually top-notch research and get access to all these resources? For me, I wanted to keep my leg at Google because of, it's a different type of it's a different type of approach to research, where like scale is a big problem. Is something that, problems they work on usually have the scale nature to it. So I want to be aware of those types of problems. But in academia, what I get is that I'm very free to work on whatever I want to work on. I'm very free to choose who I want to work with. So the students and postdocs, you get to hire them and choose who matches your personality and what values you share together. In industry, you don't decide who you work with. You basically have colleagues that are hired at the same time as you, or before you, or after you, and you don't get to have much input on that. And also, I think the freedom is a big thing. Freedom in choosing who you work with, freedom to work on whatever research topic you want to work on. Because at the end of the day, in industry, you still have a manager. You will have a manager to report to, and you have these evaluations every 6 months or every 4 months. I don't see myself like, I don't like reporting. So I want my freedom to do whatever I want and according to which values I have. And I think academia offers me that. So that's the main difference. And also mentoring, if you enjoy mentoring people and doing that long-term and you see them evolving and actually turning into great researchers, I think that's very fulfilling to me. And I get that from academia, not industry. So Man, I hope that answers your question. Another question from Mansour is, how would you rate the development of self-supervised learning given its influence in many application fields like geometry, deep learning, and NLP? I don't think about methods in terms of approaches. So if self-supervised learning is like, I wouldn't go into research saying, oh, my research is in self-supervised learning. I would rather try to scope it in a broader way, because self-supervised learning is just a tool. So I would describe research in terms of the problems that we're trying to tackle at the higher level, so that you can use whatever approach is good for that. So self-supervised learning, I think, is very trendy right now, but it may go out of favor like all the other things, or it can, I don't know about that. But I would say that the caveat here is to not think about things in terms of single methodology and identify yourself only with that, but think in terms of broad sets of problems that you're interested in and defining your research in terms of that. So one question from Usman, curious to know how Venn score compares to point processes like determinant point processes, or DPP, that trace of diversity and informative. They're related in diversity, but they are not exactly defined. They don't involve any stochastic process. The Venn score, at least, doesn't involve any stochastic process. It's something static, just relying on a similarity matrix. I don't know if that answers your questions, Usman. How do I get feedback from the audience? Another question is, okay, that's not a question. Have you computed the Venn score for ImageNet? Yeah, we did it for ImageNet 64. And the question was, does the Venn score work for image? Yes, it works for any domain where you can define similarity. So in image, there are different ways of defining similarity. It can be pixel similarity. That's very bad, actually, pixel similarity. But yes, it's one way of defining similarity. But then there's also, you can use inception embeddings and dot product cosine similarity for that. Cosine similarity on inception embeddings, you can define similarity like that. And you can apply then the Venn score. So any domain where you can define similarity between two things in that domain, you can use the Venn score for that. So it's a very general metric.
The question was from Silei.
Yeah, hi Silei. That is the biggest problem one should tackle right now, according to you. I'm very excited about AI meets material science, but I think I've said that enough. So if I were to go back to college, if I were to go back to college right now, I would study material science and AI together as double major. That's what I would do. What if your invention is always belittled? Not to listen to people. I think that's also something to be careful about, not to do things. You shouldn't be doing things for people. I think I didn't say that right. I mean, you shouldn't do things just because you want people to validate you. It should be something that's intrinsic, that you like to do intrinsically and that you care about intrinsically, regardless of what people think. If you go with what people think, you'll be very unhappy in life because people will always judge. So I don't know if that answers your question. What if your invention is always belittled? I go through that actually, like in my research, just to give you an example, like the Venn score, for example, I'm very excited about it because nobody measured diversity the way it's doing in a very flexible way. And, this idea of incorporating ecological diversity to ML and being able to do that in an unsupervised way without needing labels, it's a first. And we wrote a great paper about it. I'm very proud of it. and online, people gave it good feedback. But then when we submitted it to iClear, we were unlucky and ended up with rounds of reviews that were very critical of the tool. But that doesn't matter. That comes with the thing. So you need to have like tough skin in order to take the negative feedback and take what's good out of it. Not all bad feedback is bad. It's sometimes a reflection of maybe you didn't write it the way you should have written the paper. Maybe you should have incorporated this. So you just take what you think is useful out of the belittling and improve yourself rather than focusing on it being belittling. I don't know if that makes sense. And another question is how AI can be used to fight against inundation in Africa. That's a good question. That's a good problem. That's a good problem to think about. I like that you asked this question, Zigzag 018. That's a great problem. We run into, okay, let me think on the spot. I haven't thought about this. But maybe if you had a way of predicting, if you had a way of predicting rainfall, like they did with the work that I presented from DeepMind, then you will know how much rain would fall in a given location. And then maybe you can try, the brute force approach would just be try to put containers out there so that they don't inundate, or try to actually design that area in such a way that water doesn't get stuck, so that you have irrigation. How do you call that? That you have basically, if you can predict the rainfall in a certain spot, you can try to build that spot better such that it's amenable to a lot of rain. Now, I don't know the details of what that would mean concretely in terms of design, but you can then investigate along that direction. I don't know if that makes sense, but this is a great example of what I mean by be courageous in thinking about the problems of the continent and finding solutions to that.
Right.
AI can help most of the time, but that's a great question, and it's an important problem. We run into that a lot. Yeah. Next question is excellent. Okay, that was, thank you. I will take funding for students who want to pursue a PhD. If you want, okay, I'm glad that you asked this question. Basically, does it provide funding for students who want to pursue a PhD? I receive a lot of questions about PhD and paying. You don't pay to do a PhD, you get paid. You typically, you get your advisor, the person you're going to work with, your supervisor is going to fund you, or the university is going to fund you. But bottom line is that you shouldn't pay to do a PhD. Typically, in a lot of programs, you get given a stipend. So money that can allow you to leave, to find an apartment, a dorm, or an apartment, and pay for food and all of that. So you typically, a lot of PhD programs come with funding already. That was from Mansour. So Ndolan Sen is asking.
Adji, I think that the question was to if Vertex AI provide PhD fellowships.
Yeah, so that's a research lab, meaning that the supervisor. So I pay for my students, for example.
Yeah.
So Princeton, the way it's set up in the CS department is that first year students are covered by the university, so it's the university who funds them. Second year, they are funded by the university through TA, so they TA courses, teaching assistant in the second year. The third year and beyond is the advisor who pays. Right. So I'll be paying for my third year students and beyond. Yes, does that make sense? If so Ndolan said, hi Ndolan is asking what are the differences between my field and machine learning. I work in machine learning. So those are the same. Sile is saying, if you're advising a young Senegalese student interested in AI, what topic would you suggest to work on? Yes, this was I would work on what I'm working on right now. If I could work on it earlier than I'm doing now, which is just when I started as faculty, I would do that. I think there are so many opportunities at that intersection that, yeah, I would advise that. I would advise AI meets the sciences. There's a lot there.
Okay.
And question, hello, do you have an interest in with the research lab in Senegal? Yeah, I'm open to collaborating. I was mentioning that to Seydina and a couple of researchers I've met here. I'm very interested in collaborating. And so you can feel free to email me at adji@princeton.edu and we will discuss. Of course, it has to align with, what you're interested in and what I'm interested in, but I will be happy to have a first discussion and see what that look like. Okay, what do you do? What should we really master in mathematics to be a good machine learning engineer? The core fundamentals, I guess, linear algebra, statistics, probability. Of course, you should be comfortable with, what else is there? Computing, machine learning, you need to be a good coder, like understanding the typical engineering pipeline involved in dealing with data and all of that, and sending jobs to a cluster, those little things, you also should know that. But yeah, optimization, a bit of optimization. That's all I can think of for now. There's a good book that's available online for free called Math for Machine Learning by Mark Dyson-Roth and other people. That's a good book for the Usman Jallo. You were asking mathematics for machine learning. That's a good book to have. And during COVID-19 in Africa, have there been an AI solution from Africa for the fight against COVID? Okay, this is a great question because yeah, people have, so that's in this thing about molecular drug discovery and all of those things, they can impact, areas like, trying to find solutions to COVID-19 and all of that. I've been recently looking at olfaction. There's sometimes they tell you that these things are transmitted airborne. So I've been trying to also look at olfaction and how that intersects with healthcare. But bottom line is that you would need for all these types of applications to understand their properties, to represent them, all those things. So that's why I'm working at that scale, molecular scale, lower level scale than, I don't know if that answers your question. Another question is, your talk focused somewhat on LLMs, but one of the challenges I see going forward is the fact that most of the content generated by LLM could ultimately end up being used as a training data, so incorrectness and bias would creep in even more. That's true. Any insights on how we can tackle this issue? Okay, this is Usman. On using synthetic data. I think ultimately, like I feel like the question of bias is a very tricky problem. There are so many parts in the whole ML pipeline where bias can creep in that is very tricky. I agree with what you say. You train on biased data, you end up with a biased model, and you use outputs from the biased model to get even more data to do data augmentation, and then you will end up with something that's even worse. So I agree with that. That's possible. So maybe I would think that then trying to steer these models that's just easy talk. I really don't have the solution for how to solve a bias in machine learning, but I would say looking into, that's why I'm not focused on large language model as a research area, because I feel like that can easily happen. And because of the task modeling paradigm that I mentioned, like bias is easily creeps into these models. I don't have a solution for bias. I would think looking into, data augmentation, how to do that in a more principled way, like incorporating things like diversity, trying to see how you can build controllable generative models. That's also something very hard to do. I know that people work on that area, like controllable generative modeling, but maybe that's a way of steering these models towards things that are less biased. Is GAN getting obsolete with the new generative model, like stable diffusion model that generalizes better? That's a great question. Some of these things come into fashion and go, but the core principles may be useful somewhere else. Like EBMs, energy-based models, used to be very trendy back in the day. Now they are also a little bit more obsolete, but they can be very useful in the sciences because a lot of some of these scientific problems, they come naturally with an energy function. And you can maybe you can think that energy-based model would be more appropriate than any other model family. So I think models may come and go and trendy and not trendy, because again, the trend right now is to see all these nice image outputs. You have a text prompt, you have a great image output or video output or audio output like we're seeing nowadays. And so you can, and they're all, most of those based on diffusion models. So you'll be like, why do I need to study anything else? I think you can get, for example, a good thing from GANs, which is the training paradigm. I call it adversarial learning. I know that that's used, that same phrase is used in a different ML when you're studying adversarial attacks. But I mean here, the optimization behind GANs is very useful, especially in, fairness research. They use that a lot. And also in statistics to predict, to estimate the median in high dimension. There's a paper that proposed to use adversarial learning, so the GAN optimization, in order to do that. And so I think you shouldn't take things in terms of trends, but in terms of what's the core principle behind it that you can take anywhere. So I like to approach things like that. Another question: how good do you have to be to get to your lab? I mean grades. I don't look at, it's a good question. I don't look at grades only. So if your grades are very, 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 very bad, they wouldn't even let me, because the school, they also have their own, they have their standard. But I myself don't own, if your grades are reasonable, I look at research match. If you're capable with someone who can get things done, that's what I favor most. So I hope that answers your question. Is it possible to use the method for normalizing flow? Yes, you can regularize. What method? Do you mean using the Venn score to regularize normalizing flows? You can do that if that was the question. Seydina, what do we do? Do I keep going?
Yeah, I don't know. Alhassan, is it okay to go again?
Yes, it works. You can grab some more minutes to proceed.
Okay. Thank you.
You can cover all the relevant questions you deem necessary to answer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Somebody say, is there a link?
You can choose.
Okay. Is there a link between the, because so far I've been going like linearly of all of them. Is there a link between the regulatory framework that regulate data and access to data for AI person, how to solve the issue of availability of data in the African continent? I think funding that would require funding, like funding data collection efforts would be a good thing to do, or being creative in terms of, looking at the line of work that looks at how to do AI with limited data, trying to be creative there and incorporating domain knowledge more. So how does explain and interpret AI differ from traditional statistical inference? They are different. In explainable AI, some of them, they focus on, you're just focusing on explaining the output of a neural network by fitting linear models, for example, to the outputs, which may be limited. So you already have a neural network trained, and you take the output, fit it in the linear model, and use the interpretability of the linear model to do explanation. But even though the linear model is from the statistics field, it's because it doesn't mean that it's the same thing. I don't know if that makes sense. They are different. How does AI come up to scientific assert causality? Right, there are people working, AI naturally doesn't do causality, but there are people working on causal reasoning, or trying to incorporate causality into AI system. I'm not working on that currently, but that's a big problem, yes. There are questions that are naturally causal questions. Like, for example, if I ask you, why does a material have certain property? That's a causal question that requires causality. So there are questions like that are typically causal questions. There are people working on causality for AI. I'm not currently looking into that, but that's something I'm interested in. I forgot to say that, I'm if there are grad students here or postdocs, please feel free to email me. I'm always on the lookout for great people to join the lab. Adji at Princeton.edu. What's the real difference between machine learning and deep learning? Deep learning is a subset of machine learning. So there are also approaches in machine learning that are not based on training neural networks with backpropagation. Is great. Is a subset of machine learning. Do you think that quantum computing is the future of research? There are a lot of people who are very excited about quantum computing. I would be open to it because I think, you know, there's good in a lot of things. But if there's something you yourself believe is something that's very interesting that I don't see right now, I don't know everything, then please, by any means, go with that. Go with what you truly believe in, what you think is actually a good approach to a lot of things. Bias might be more diversity, right? Oh, I don't understand that one. What do you think of African national languages? Oh, that's a great question. So what do you think about the integration of African national languages? I think I always hear, oh, Africa has diverse sets of languages, and we think that we are, like, you know, very proud of that. I think that's actually a burden. I think it was we all speak so many different languages that's a barrier to us communicating more effectively. We would all be speaking English, not because English is the best or anything, but because English is the language that's being spoken in all these areas. In the science, like English, people speak English in the sciences, the publications and all of that. A lot of the resources, the majority of it available online is in English. So, you know, just thinking pragmatically, I think we should be all learning that, just so that we can, we don't isolate ourselves from all the things that the world has to offer. So I don't get attached to African languages. I think, you know, of course, there's good in everything, but I wouldn't hang on it and say that's what we just have to use. I wouldn't mind using what everybody else uses, so that you can, you know, be part of the thing and get something out of what's available out there. What do you mean by reasonable?
Yeah.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, Seydina, I think, yes, there are some people who have raised their hands, maybe check. And we should also think of giving them the floor. Some might just be interested in contributing instead of asking questions. We should find a way to give them the floor. Can you see them, Seydina? It seems that there are some people who have raised their hand.
I don't see it.
I personally do not see. I have just got notification from another panel.
The way you always do it. Oh.
Yeah, myself cannot see it. I will check that information. I've just been notified. So go on, proceed. Sorry for that.
There's I think there's one left, which is O2.
There are three.
Lab remotely? No, 3. Can we join the lab remotely? It's in person. The second one is, what is the time complexity of computing the Venn score? If you have, can we use it in interactive pattern mining, where the user needs to very good diversity in sample patterns in a few seconds? Oh, I didn't think about that application, but probably in terms of time complexity, it's if you have the similarity defined as a dot product between feature vectors, then it's O of D square N. It's in the paper. We mentioned complexity in the paper, so I would read it again. But it's same complexity as, you know, other metrics like FID, which is inception score, which is used in deep learning right now. It's not any more expensive to compute if you have similarity defined as a dot product between features, which is mostly the case in a lot of settings. So do you personally think we can reach AGI at a point? I'm not interested in thinking about that question, because I don't see the benefit of seeking AGI. I'm not trying to build a human or replicate a human. I just want to solve problems. Problems that can help people. That's what I'm interested in. Maybe people looking at AGI see solving problem that way, and good for them. but I don't think of AI research in terms of trying to achieve AGI. I don't know if that makes sense. How do we avoid carbon footprints? There are people working on how to build models that are more efficient than the current large models. For example, I have a colleague in NLP at Princeton who's working on that for language models, trying to see how to build more efficient language models, meaning they will consume less resources than these big models, so less carbon footprint. From all the biggest companies in AI, which one should you recommend to people who have the opportunities? They are all very different. They're all very different, and there's exciting work coming from anywhere, so it depends on you. Is it possible to have AI and content community degrees at the same time? By all means, go with that. Zigzag, I think I really like your questions. Yeah, it's a great area. People are seeing that as a lot of people think like you, that quantum is the future. So by all means, please go ahead and study that if that is your passion. I think it's very promising. Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. I think that's it. I'm done with the questions there, but there are more in the open Q&A.
Yeah, there are more in the open Q&A. If you want, you can proceed there, but if you don't, it's okay too.
Oh, actually, some of these are the same as the ones in the chat.
Yeah. Yes, definitely.
Okay. Yeah, I think a lot of these are in the email adji@princeton.edu. Let me send it here. Here. Yeah, I think that's it.
Okay, thank you very, very, very much, Adji.
Thank you, everyone. This was really great.
Yeah, thank you for all. Alhassan, I will give you the floor to conclude if you want.
Okay, so it's just, thank you very much, Seydina. So it's just going to be thanking everybody. So on behalf of the Virtual University, the Pôle of Innovation, Expertise, and Development, we would like to thank Dr. Seydina Moussa NDIAYE, the moderator of the panel, for his wonderful job. So really congratulations for everything you have done. And we would like also to express our deep sense of gratitude to Dr. Adji Bousso DIENG for her brilliant presentation, her availability, and mostly her intellectual generosity to share expertise. Our thanks go also to all the participants and the technical assistants for their time and commitment. And we hope to see you again next Tuesday. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. And congratulations again, Dr. DIENG, and congratulations, Dr. NDIAYE. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.